back with bonus 11, the last and final NFL Smash Mouth football video of the series. Unfortunately, I could not get everybody's favorite football team and favorite team or favorite player on this list. It consists of 10 to 11 videos. I did the best I could, and before my camera cut off in 5 to 10 minutes, let's go ahead and get into it. It's going to be John Elway. That's right, John Elway, when he was in his prime playing for the Denver Broncos, versus Peyton Manning, the golden boy of the NFL. That's what they consider Peyton Manning as, the golden boy of the NFL, when he was with the Indianapolis Coits and then later traded to the Denver Broncos. Strange and ironic that both these players would pop up towards, the middle of the era and then later would see each other face to face. Now, in the 1980s, John Elway was on the top of his class. Selected in 1983 in the first round at the number 1 pick to the Denver Broncos. Now, John Elway was just like Troy Aikman. He was just like Joe Montana. He could play football at 2 different positions. He could play quarterback, which he went to, Gardena Hills High School, where he played quarterback in high school. And then he went to Stanford. I know something about Stanford because I have a cousin that played football maybe 4 years prior to John Elway going into the NFL draft. See, a bunch of coincidence, isn't it? Now, as a kid, I enjoy watching the Denver Broncos kick ass and take names. I really did. I was a huge fan of the Miami Dolphins, and my favorite football player on that football team at the time. And I wasn't that much of a fan of the 49ers until Deion Sanders got on that football team. I had some players, but I also had some football teams, and at that time it was the 80s, the 90s, and if I had any team in the West that I knew that I could count on to win when they needed to win, it was the Denver Broncos. At that time, the Raiders weren't really winning. It was just the 49ers, the Cowboys, but like I said, drafted in 1983, first round, first pick, 1983, and right out of the gate, he won a total of 9 games in a row. And he came in like at 6 feet, 6'1", 200 pounds. And he wasn't the quarterbacks that we see today. He wasn't that loudmouth, in-your-face type of quarterback. He was very quiet, stayed to himself. He knew when to talk, when to keep his mouth quiet. He did his talking in the football game. I remember in 1987 or 1988 interview, they asked him how come he don't go out to the nightclubs and the bars like most quarterbacks, and he had this speech that they made him apologize for, because he said that when you're in the lead, you need to be serious about winning football games. He was the first guy to practice, last guy to leave practice. If he saw somebody had a flat tire down the street, he was the type of guy to take out $200, $300, $400 and get your tire fixed. Your car, crashed or whatever, he would stay there until the police got there. He was that type of guy that if he saw homeless people didn't have no food and water, he would help them get shelter into a hotel. You couldn't get on the bus, he gave you some money to the bus. And if you're in the middle of nowhere, he would actually take you to the football stadium. And not that he did it all the time, but he would actually be giving people tickets to come see him perform at a high competitive level. That's just the type of quarterback he was. He was quiet, but when he got into the football game, that's when he did his loudest talking. He would throw the football to the wide receivers, the running backs. If there were no options, he would run up the middle, whether it was the right side, left side of the football field, and drive right into the end zone. And he would make 5 or 6 or 7 touchdowns, or how many touchdowns it required to win the football game. He would beat teams like the Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers, the Green Bay Packers, the Patriots, but their division rival was always going to be somebody like the Dallas Cowboys and the Chargers and the Raiders. He would beat all those people. And when he would go face to face with somebody like the Miami Dolphins and Damn it, I forgot his name already. Just made a video about it. Anyway, he would beat his best friend who played on the Miami Dolphins every single time. He would come into their home field advantage and beat them by 20 points. When the Dolphins came to Denver, they get beat by 20 points. Dan Marino, there we go. Dan Marino would always be frustrated that he would do good for the first 2 quarters of the game, and then the third quarter and the fourth quarter, John Elway would win the football game. He would win or lose against Troy Aikman and those Dallas Cowboys. And every now and then he would lose to Joe Montana and those San Francisco 49ers. Now in 1986, he took them to the Super Bowl. Now, they managed to have the Giants on the ropes, but he didn't pay attention to the legendary late great Lawrence Taylor and got sacked 10 times in a row and fumbled the football and didn't even call a timeout with like 10 seconds left on the clock or something like that, and it cost them the Super Bowl, and the Giants went on to win the championship. And I remember people laughing and making fun of him because he had a stutter. Like, basically, they were making fun of the way he talked because he's actually from the country. Like, somewhere on his mom's or dad's side of the family, he comes from the countryside. And they were making fun of him because he cost Denver a championship. It wasn't his fault. It just, unfortunately, he did not pay attention. He did not know he was going to get hit 10 times in a row by Lawrence Taylor. He fumbled the football, and when he realized he did not have the football in his hand to throw for a touchdown that would have gotten him his first championship, so it wouldn't be until a total of 12 years later, after he won an MVP, that he had the best record. They won the most games. They beat every team in front of them. And then finally in 1997, he goes to a Super Bowl. And miraculously, he wins that Super Bowl. I think either going in overtime or in overtime. One of those they actually beat the New York Buffalo Bills for it, because the New York Buffalo Bills had went to the Super Bowl like 4 straight years in a row. And then he does something no one expects. He turns around a year later in 1998 and he wins back-to-back championships. He wins 2 championships 2 years in a row with the Super Bowl MVP and the MVP of the regular season, making him the best player of the game. At that era, at that time, he had outlasted everybody. At this point, Troy Aikman was on the verge of retiring from the Cowboys. The 49ers had got rid of Joe Montana. Jerry Rice was gone. Deion Sanders was gone. And it was Steve Young's team. 49ers weren't there anymore. Yeah, a lot of things began to happen in that time period where he managed to win back-to-back championships. They tried to convince him to come back for the 1999-2000 season. At this point, he was like 33, 34, around my age. And he kind of said he would love to play some more football games, but he was like being very smart with it. He was like, the older you get hurt. And at that point, it was a passing of the torch. I can't remember which quarterback he had gave it to, but I think at that point in time, I think either Brett Favre or somebody else at that time he was going to pass the torch to. He knew that his window of winning was closing. You know, he led the Denver Broncos to 3 Super Bowls. He won 2 back-to-back, so he was 2-1 in Super Bowls. And right in the middle of retiring after winning a championship, that same year in the 1998 draft, coming in as selected at round 1, pick 1, was Peyton Manning, who had played at Tennessee or Tennessee State. And while he was at the NFL draft, Peyton Manning and John Elway passed each other in the hallway. They talked for about 30 minutes, and strange and ironically, if we think about it, John Elway had the number 1 pick. Peyton Manning had the number 1 pick in the first round. Both guys won championships in college football. And both guys almost would have played on the same football team in a 12-year span, if you think about it. Because in the beginning, the Indianapolis Colts, at the time, they were called the Baltimore Colts, because they were in Baltimore for like almost 17 years, and then the city and the football team had a fallout. The team and the organization wanted the city to build a new football stadium. The people complained about the taxes being too high in Baltimore. So the football team, in the middle of the night, left and went to Indianapolis. And then it caused a grudge for the next 20-something years. And then they said Indianapolis would never win championships for leaving the city of Baltimore. And then Baltimore wouldn't get a football team until like 1995, 1996. And they sworn that they would win a championship before the Indianapolis Colts, which, surprise, surprise, they did, because in the year 2000, Ray Lewis came to Baltimore. Well, he was already there, but they had won a championship. And then Peyton Manning was number 1 selected by the Indianapolis Colts. And right out of the gate, it was like the second coming of John Elway and Troy Aikman. You know, it was like a combination of that and a spitting image of his father, Archie Moore. I might be getting the name wrong. There's a lot of Archie Moores, but his father had played professional football in the early 1960s, mid-1970s, played 18 years, didn't win no championship, stayed with one team his whole career, and Peyton Manning was destined to break the curse. Him and his brother both kind of came in around that same time. You know, Eli Manning got sent to those New York Giants, and Big Brother got sent to the Coits. And Big Brother basically put up superstar numbers. Same exact thing. He would win 8-9 games in a row. Throw the football, and same thing like for John Elway. If nobody was going to block, every now and then he would run to the end zone and make 2 or 3 touchdowns. Or he would call a timeout if the game got too close. And then when he needed to put the game away, he would score 10 or 15 points to keep the game away so could no one tie it. One of Peyton Manning's best football games was against Tom Brady and those New England Patriots. I remember 5 out of those 20 matchups that would take place throughout his whole career, one of those was in overtime. And I was kind of about to drop on the floor and spit out my Coca-Cola if Tom Brady didn't win that football game. And Peyton Manning threw so many shots to the wide receiver. I couldn't believe that what Peyton Manning was doing in his prime was a shock. Like, he reminded me of the game where John Elway and Troy Aikman would have a shootout, where it was the Denver Broncos versus the Dallas Cowboys in the 1990s. They would go back and forth, back and forth. You couldn't even tell who was going to win the football game. And surprise, surprise, Peyton Manning beat Tom Brady in his 9th match. Like, it took him 9 games and a 7-year history to finally beat Tom Brady. And then finally, he goes to a Super Bowl in 2006 and wins. Surprise, surprise. He goes in there, and who does he face in the Super Bowl? He takes on those Chicago Bears that had the best record, the best football player, the best offense, the best defense, the best everything. And I'm thinking, okay, Peyton Manning ain't going to beat these Chicago Bears. They're bigger, they're stronger, and they're faster. And like Peyton Manning in his prime, he just put up a superstar performance, throws the ball, and then before we know it, he beats them in overtime. And you got to feel bad for the Chicago Bears, because they had an undefeated record, and to have to lose 1 or 2 games and get into the Super Bowl, and then have the advantage to win the Super Bowl, and then have Peyton Manning come in as the underdogs and knock off the favorites was a shock. He finally, in 12 years of his career, he finally won a championship. You know, he managed to win. At that time, he had already won 3 NFL MVPs. Not NBA, but he won 3 NFL MVPs, NFL Super Bowl MVP with a championship. And then finally he would go back to the Super Bowl in 2009 against Drew Brees and them New Orleans Saints. And you know what happened there? I expected him to win his second championship, and I didn't think Drew Brees and them Saints would make a comeback. And when they made the comeback and won, I was stunned. I was shocked. It's like, what the hell? It's like, Peyton Manning, how in the hell can you lose to these people? And he did. And then finally in 2010, he injured his neck. I remember watching the game. I came home. I can't remember if I had a bad day at school. I got rejected by a girl, of course. And I came home and I turned on the TV set in the third quarter, and I noticed somebody came from behind him and just laid on top of him when he was trying to throw the football. And he got up real slow, and I was kind of concerned because I was like, they were playing against either the Bills or the Jets or whoever, and he was getting up slow, and he had a shoulder injury. He was trying to fight off, and then his neck. And this caused the Indianapolis Colts to kind of consider on what do we do. We got him and another quarterback. What do we do? And you know how that go. He had to leave because they wanted the younger quarterback at that time to be the face of the Indianapolis Colts. You take this Colts football team and 13 years of each other to 2 Super Bowls. You're 1-1 in Super Bowls. And when he saw that things weren't going to go his way, he demanded a trade. Who did he get in contact with? His idol and best friend, John Elway, to where? The Denver Broncos. Strange and ironic. John Elway was this close to playing for the Colts 20 years earlier, where he didn't want to play for no Colts. He wanted to play for the Denver Broncos because it was close to where he lived with his friends and family. And Peyton Manning was welcome to Denver, and the rest was history. 2012, 2013, 2 years in a row, they have the best record. They win the most football games, and when he gets with Denver, finally, after years of the critics saying he would never beat Tom Brady and those New England Patriots, he beats Tom Brady. He beats the San Francisco 49ers. He beats his rival team. He beats his former football team, the Coits. And then finally we get to the 2014 season where they have the best record, 3 years in a row. He now at this point has 5 MVPs. He goes in there, and who does he go up against? He goes up against a young quarterback, Russell Wilson, a Richard Sherman, and those Seattle Seahawks as the favorites. Now, I thought, he was going to lose, which I was actually right. I said, he ain't going to win it. He ain't going to win a third Super Bowl. Seattle Seahawks going to win. People thought I was smoking crack or something. And when he lost the Super Bowl, I was like, I told y'all. He injured. He ain't 100%. He ain't in his prime. If this was the prime Peyton Manning, he would have won that. Finally, we get to a year later in 2015, back-to-back Super Bowls, and he goes up against Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers, a football team with an undefeated record. And once again, I underestimated the legendary great Peyton Manning, because I thought Cam Newton and them boys was going to win, and the score was 24-10. And to this very day, I have not worn my Cam Newton t-shirt ever since. Disappointment to me in the Super Bowl. I see Cam Newton do all this celebrating, all this cheesing, all this Superman crap, but you can't even perform in a Super Bowl like you expected to. And to see Peyton Manning win a second championship, go to 4 Super Bowls, 2 different football teams, and then after that to consider retiring. He popped up on Saturday Night Live as the funniest man. So he managed to finish his career with 2 championships, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 5 NFL MVPs, and to retire as a Denver Bronco. And then to have his jersey retire with the Indianapolis Colts, something we thought we would never see. So we have to ask ourselves, realistically and practically, who's better in their prime? John Elway or Peyton Manning. Now, they both have 2 championships, 2 apiece. John Elway went to 3 Super Bowls. Had he not retired in 98 and stayed for one more year in 1999, he could have easily have won with the defense that they had at that time, because this is a defensive firepower football team. Denver has always been known for offense, not so much defense. Not that they're not good at defense, because they are. He could have easily came back and won 3 championships 3 years in a row. He thought 2 was good enough, but he could have got 3 with his ability to play on the football. And I think if I'm a betting man, I got to go with John Elway in his prime. Just not because he won back-to-back championships, but because he was able to find multiple ways to win when there were no ways to win. And the second reason why I go with John Elway is primarily because I believe that he wasn't getting the most attention like all the quarterbacks was. Like Troy Aikman, when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, he won 3 championships, he was getting all the attention. And I felt like that when it was the 49ers and when it was everybody else winning championships, he wasn't getting as much attention. He liked to stay quiet. When they won the Super Bowls, that was the best time he celebrated. We're going to Disneyland. And then he retired when he could have easily won 3 in a row. Peyton Manning got hit with so much exposure, so much attention like LeBron James, that I believe that might have played into why he won his first Super Bowl, lost the second Super Bowl, lost the third Super Bowl, and then won the final Super Bowl. So there's a case of when you get too much attention, it can cause you to lose a championship. So for argument's sake, I'm going to say by a slight hair, John Elway is slightly better. Now, some people might say, what if you take the championships out of the equation? Then it would probably arguably be a tie. And if you were to take today's media and exposure that Peyton Manning had, John Elway would still probably be a better football player because he was quiet. Peyton Manning was quiet too. But Peyton Manning did try to go out to the bars and the clubs just for the social experiment, just so he can show that he's a sociable guy, where his brother Eli wasn't really into that. He was into just playing football and being serious. So that settles the debate. So this was like a fantasy matchup. Until then, peace.